have Ms. Cubas answer each of the questions, 2 to 3 minutes per question. We will also have any of the board members or any of the stakeholders who have follow-up questions too. And I want to make sure that this is understood, that it's because it is important for us to follow the process so that we don't ask the same question 10 times or a twist of the same question. So if we can do that, I would appreciate that. So we can, if we can have any questions put on the cards so that we can sort them out and then ask them as follow-up. Ms. Marquez will be giving us a hand along with Mr. Scott Johnson to collect those cards so that we can do follow-up questions to Ms. Cubas. We all got that? All right, so here we go. We're going to start with Ms. Cubas and the first questions that we have on that.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Cubas. I'm the Chief of Staff to Councilmember Jose Huizar. He very much wanted to be here with you today. He is fully committed to returning to your neighborhood council meeting. I know you have a meeting in November, I believe November 3rd, and we will try our best to have him here. He wanted to make sure that he sent me here. I'm the highest ranking staff member in his office. Here to represent him tonight. So thank you very much for your time. And I wanted to start first with a real quick overview of the city's budget process. I will keep that part brief because I know you have very specific questions. I also have some handouts. One of the main handouts that you should have up there deals with the budget structure. And for the audience, I just want to show you what this handout is. Basically, it talks about the city's fund structure. There's 2 main aspects to the budget. The general fund, and the revenues from that come from property tax, utility users tax, sales tax, business tax. And then there's another category here called special funds. So those include things like Stormwater Pollution Abatement Fund, Municipal Housing Finance Fund, Tax Reform Fund, and also the Central Recycling Transfer Station Fund, Measure R Special Fund. So that's the structure. The general funds for the city is about $4 billion. Special funds combined, and there's at least 60 to 100 listed here, is another 3 to 4 billion. I brought the budget book here with me in case some of you want to look at all of those details. It's one of my favorite books to read. So let's talk about special funds, what the meaning is, and discretionary funds. What's the difference? So the chart gave you the general fund and the special funds. Then there's another type of special fund called a discretionary fund. Really what that means is the city council or the department or the mayor have the discretion to utilize those funds based upon designated purposes. So to give you an example that is also part of the special fund list, some of the discretionary funds that the city of Los Angeles has includes things like the street furniture fund, and that comes from fees that are assessed to folks who want to advertise on city bus benches and bus shelters. There's another fund called the General City Purposes Fund. There's another fund called the Arts and Cultural Amenities Fund. There are at least 5 or 10 funds that some of the council offices have. And they have designated purposes. So there was, at some point during the history of the city, there was an ordinance that created those. Another one is called the pipeline fund. So whenever there is a utility company that, or oil company that wants to come in and build underground pipes, they have to pay the city. Generally, the format is that most of those funds go to the general fund. For example, there was funds called the Real Property Trust Fund, where, for example, if there was a city-owned property in a particular council district, the proceeds from that sale went directly to that council office. Now that is no longer the case because due to the budget deficit, that particular fund was swept in order to assist with the budget deficit. Similar to the pipeline fund. At some point, there was an ability to have some of those revenues go into the council fund, but that is no longer the case due to the budget deficit. So let me speak directly to your questions. And I know many of your questions have to do with CLARTS, and I know I saw former council member Nick Pacheco here, and he was very much part of the creation of that fund. He was there when the ordinance was adopted, and just so you know, I have a copy of the ordinance in case some of you want to take a look at it. So I don't know if he's still here. I'd love to have him join me so that he could explain how this was created and how during his term of office, the funds were utilized. But we're certainly following the letter of the law in the sense of there's an ordinance and there's specified purposes. So your first question has to do with what is the role of discretionary funds for our community needs? So the way that the city created these funds was really to mitigate impacts to the community from certain things like building a pipeline, from the street furniture. So that was the purpose. That's the purpose of many of these special funds or discretionary funds, to mitigate community impacts, to have a community benefit. So I hope I answered that question. If not, feel free to ask me some more about that. Number two, what are the discretionary funds available in Council District 14, and how are these funds allocated throughout the district? So I mentioned a few, street furniture, pipeline, which was swept and went into the general fund, so we don't have access to that anymore, real property trust fund, cultural affairs funds, and some others. How are these funds allocated throughout the district? Many of you here are very aware of the process. So what typically happens is a constituent or a group can come to our council office, meet with the staff, and talk about what are the needs of that particular group. So I know for Wilson, the issue of the books and the library came up. In fact, the neighborhood council has benefited from special funds from Council District 14 in the past. So the process has been, just like in the former offices with Councilman Pacheco, Councilman Antonio Villaraigosa, is that there is a direct communication with the council office where a community member, a community group can meet with our staff. Typically what we ask is just some specifics about what will it be used for so that we can follow the letter of the law in terms of what that fund was created for, and there's an ordinance for each fund and how it is to be utilized. Some of it requires a council motion, and some don't. They're at the discretion of the council member and the council office. And so, again, the process is if there's a need, if there is a project that an individual or a group would like to work with the council office with, you set up a meeting with the staff or with the councilman. Typically, we ask for a budget. We want to know a little bit more about the purpose. We want to make sure that the funding source is appropriate, meaning that we want to follow the letter of the law. And that's typically the process. And I know Councilman Pacheco can certainly speak to that because through his term in office, there was community groups, individuals that came to his office asking for financial assistance for various projects. What are the CLARTS funds? So let's talk about CLARTS, and this is the time when I hope Councilman Pacheco can join me up here. He is certainly more of an expert than I am. So CLARTS stands for the Central Los Angeles Recycling and Transfer Station Trust Fund. And I have provided a handout for you over here, and I'm hoping that those will make it into the audience, where I have provided pictures of the transfer station. Basically, the city in, I believe it was April of '04, purchased this transfer station where currently you have waste being housed there en route to a landfill. So that's what we mean by a transfer station. So when the green trucks go to your house and pick up your trash from the black bin, they are, depending on the area, transported to the transfer station, and then that trash is then transported to a landfill, because as many of you know, there's limited landfill capacity in the city of LA. So that's CLARTS. Now, to mitigate the impact to the community of having this transfer station, and when the city purchased it, I believe it was April of 2004, there was an ordinance created, and I have a copy of the ordinance, that provided for 2 separate funds. One is the Central Los Angeles Recycling and Transfer Station Trust Fund, and the other fund is called the Central Los Angeles Recycling and Transfer Station Community Amenities Trust Fund. So there are 2 funds for this particular CLARTS. And so I know some of you have thrown out numbers of $1 million or $2 million. And in this budget book, actually, I've marked it. So if any of you want to come up and take a look at it, we have the schedule of the trust fund, which lays out what the total revenue is to the city and the outlays, the appropriations. And so you can see the 2 different funds in there and what they go for. And so the majority of the appropriations is for, and I'll read you what the budget book says, okay? The CLARTS Trust Fund receives revenue for transfer services provided to private haulers engaged in providing solid waste collection services to non-city entities. Revenue is used to pay the direct cost of hauling and disposing of solid waste, as well as related community amenities. Revenue, including interest, generated in excess of the direct costs associated with processing waste from private haulers, is used to pay a proportionate, in parentheses, in relation to private hauler tonnages, share of salaries, equipment, maintenance, and capital improvement projects at the facility as directed by the mayor and city council. So the majority of the fund goes to pay the Bureau of Sanitation, which is the department that's in charge of running the CLARTS station. And by the way, in case any of you want to go take a look at it, it's located in 2201 Washington Boulevard in Santa Fe. It is in Council District 14. And again, I invite you to come and take a look at the budget book if you wish, but you can see that the total revenue, according to the budget book, which is public information available to everyone, is $2.4 million. In terms of the appropriation, the majority, except for $60,000, is available for the CLARTS Community Amenities Fund, which is the fund that I think you are all mostly interested in. So the majority, for example, appropriation sanitation, $400,000, CLARTS Community Amenities, $60,000, private landfill disposal fees, and what that means is we get charged whenever we take our trash to the landfills. So that expense comes out of the fund. Private haulers expense. So the city contracts with private haulers to take the trash to the landfill, so we have to pay for that expense. So that's the majority, actually, of the funds. So CLARTS community amenities, based on this budget book, is $60,000, and this for fiscal year 2010-11. Now, let me go back to your questions here. Okay, how do we, organizations, community stakeholders, and neighborhood council access these CLARTS funds? What would be the process to access them? So the answer is similar to what I mentioned before, is feel free to make an appointment with the staff, with the councilman, and discuss with us what you would like to do, what project you would like to undertake, what are some of the concerns that you have, and let's work together on figuring out what is the budget for it, and does the city law allow for the use of that fund? So for example, and what I mean by that is city funds cannot be used for a private purpose. They have to have a public purpose. So if it's for an individual and to the benefit of that individual, that is not allowed. It has to be typically provided to a 501c3, a not-for-profit organization, a neighborhood council. And just to give you an example of some of the appropriations from CLARTS, because one of the things that the ordinance says, and I can read to you, I'll read you the specific one, because I know this is important to you. It says, the fund shall be used for the purpose of financing community amenities within the City of Los Angeles Council District 14. So that is in the ordinance. And the way to access these funds, once the meeting and there's been agreement that the project should be funded because we can use city funds, is it's done through a council motion. So all of the information, including back to when Councilman Pacheco was in office, Councilman Villaraigosa was in office, and when currently, all of that, because it's a council motion, is available online through the council file management system. I did bring with me sample motions, and if you look back to the beginning of the fund, there's a lot of motions on there. And you're free to look it up. It's the City of LA website, Council File Management System. You could look up CLARTS. So just to give you an example, I know we talked about the irrigation system, and I do want to clarify a little bit for you what that means. So in my hands, I have the motion that we submitted to repair the median irrigation system. The amount of $26,747 from CLARTS in order to repair the irrigation system of various street median islands in Council District 14. Now, these are not water pipes that are under the street. These are actually just like your sprinkler system, if you think about your system at home. So I know mine is broken right now and I have to repair it. But so the city median islands, if you go up and down Huntington Drive, they need maintenance, cleaning, weeding. They also need water, right? Because there's plants, there's grass. And so the irrigation system is the sprinkler system that provides that water. So this motion and the funding is going to go to repair it because the city's infrastructure is very old. And so that sprinkler system needs to be repaired. One exciting thing that we're doing is actually we're putting solar panels because many of these sprinkler systems have meters, right? And so DWP pays for that water that comes in through those meters. And in order to save the city money, we are installing solar panels on the meters. So that will save money in the long run.
Ms. Cubas?
Yes.
Excuse me, we had allotted 20 minutes for your answering the questions. So if you can just quickly address question number 4 and number 5,
okay,
so that we can get to the other questions that stakeholders and neighborhood council members have.
Okay.
For you, we'll also allow 5 minutes to Mr. Pacheco if he wishes to address any of those questions that you've had before addressing in your presentation to him. So if you can address number 4 and 5, thank you.
So the number 4 is we request the financial reports past through current balances that are in the fund, including all expenditures and transfer of monies from this fund for your current full term. Now, I mentioned to you that there's a lot of council records, there's a lot of accounting, so we need to work on that. The city clerk is our accountant. I am actually not an accountant, and we go by what accounting system the city clerk has in order to track all of the appropriations. But certainly, if you look at the motions, you can at least begin to track, if any of you are interested, those expenditures. And I know there's been requests in previous months about this as well, and the response that the city attorney has asked me to provide to you is that the city clerk has that information available if you'd like to request that from the city clerk, because they are our accountants, they're our bookkeepers for the council offices. And it'd be interesting too, actually, to see previous council members and how they spent their money. Number 5, is there an opportunity to have CLARTS funds match any funding to those projects being funded by the LA-32 Neighborhood Council? Well, like I mentioned before, the process is we'd love to meet with you if there's any particular needs that you may have. I just want to quickly also, in conclusion, just mention a few of the other items that CLARTS has funded, and I have copies of those motions too. Back in, I guess this was in 07, and again, I have the motions with me because that's how I look these things up on Council File Management System. I just print it out for myself. Northeast Trees for some improvements in El Sereno. Another motion, actually, allocation to the neighborhood council. Another motion allocating aspects of Barrio Action, El Sereno Winter Wonderland, and tree lighting ceremony. The source was CLARTS, and so on and so forth. So that's just an example. Now let me just tell you something real quick about the revenue, because I have the budget book here, but because CLARTS, the transfer station, and the revenue it gets is based on the waste that is produced and processed there, as the economy recedes or declines, there's actually less trash that is produced. And so that means less revenue. So it's an interesting aspect about our time right now. In terms of the revenues, it can vary depending on the tonnage of the trash. It could be 50,000, 60,000, 100,000, 300,000 for the amenities trust fund now. This is the one I'm talking about. Or it could be as high as 300,000 or 400,000. So each year is different. So there isn't a set amount that is guaranteed each year.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. One of the issues that we have is that we want to make sure that the stakeholders, as well as neighborhood council members, do understand in layman terms what these funds are, how they're used, how they're appropriated to the different communities, to the different areas in City 14. So they have asked some questions.
Great.
So we're going to address those questions.
Okay.
And I'm sure that our board members, more than one, have had a few questions themselves. So, Mr. Chavez, before we go on.
You know the communities of Eagle Rock,
Hold on
Highland
one
Park?
second, Mr. Chavez. We had a process for the questions. So we had a process for the questions. Did you turn in your questions over here?
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I apologize.
Okay. So we're gonna go with the questions that we have, that have been submitted already. So Mr. Johnson is going to ask the questions, and then, if you can just give us some feedback on that, and then we'll have Mr. Pacheco then, chime in later after the question. Thank you.
Question, and we'll make these short and concise in the interest of time. How much of the CLARTS funds go to administrative costs, salaries, extra? Second part of that question is breakdown of salaries to Eagle Rock, Boyle Heights, El Sereno, downtown.
I don't have that information handy. I do know that the fund does allow for expenditures related to the operations of the council office. In terms of the other areas, I'd have to work with the clerk to look that up. It is in the ordinance, it is mentioned in there that is within Council District 14. So that includes all areas in Council District 14,
So,
where it can be utilized.
So just so that we understand this correctly, your answer to that would be that you can have access to the breakdown to the communities given.
I'd have to look that up. I honestly, I can't tell you right now whether I have that information handy or do the research on the motions.
Okay,
we can certainly work on that and get back to you.
Okay, so one of the things that we want to do for any of the questions that we have that were given to us by stakeholders or other board members that we don't get an answer, we will be submitting a letter to the council member asking him for an answer on the questions that were asked and not answered at this time. Okay?
Okay, next question. Over 5 years, what?
Okay, then can we wait for all the questions and then you can go ahead and ask the question? Thank you.
Over 5 years, how much of any of these funds were transferred to the councilmatic funds? Do all discretionary funds require council motion, or are there some that you're often spend without public vote?
Read it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, repeat it, please.
Right. Yeah, and the people who write questions, keep them short and concise in the interest of time. Over 5 years, how much of these discretionary funds are transferred to councilmatic office funds? From discretionary to council office funds.
Okay. Over 5 years, that's a long time, so I'd have to look that up. Now, in terms of council funds, each council office gets a budget. The budget to cover salaries, to cover supplies, to cover costs related to the lease of the district office, costs related to operations. And so when you say council funds, you want generally.
Right, so if there was a, per se, CLARTS fund being transferred to the council office fund.
Mm-hmm.
So one account being transferred to another inter-office fund, per se.
Okay, I'll write down the question. Thank you.
Okay, next question. There seems to be reluctance on the part of the city, per your statement from the city attorney, to give us a yearly summary of the income and expenditures. Why?
I mean, I'd have to have the city attorney answer that question. The main reason is because the city clerk is the keeper of all the records. There are accountants or clerk or bookkeepers. And so I think we'd have to ask the city attorney that too, as far as what is the issue. But as I mentioned before, this is technically public information. Because CLARTS requires a motion, everything is available and open to the public on the website. In terms of the other discretionary funds, like let's say street furniture, arts and cultural, pipeline, real property, many of those also require a council motion. Sometimes it depends on the level of funding that is requested. I don't know off the top of my head what each fund level threshold is in terms of whether it triggers a motion or not. but our city clerk is the expert too, and they are the ones that tell us whether it triggers a need for a council motion or not, or whether we can internally ask them to transfer the funds.
Okay. Moving on, why has the councilman never alerted the community of these funds? He has been here for 5 years. He never mentions monies being available in the email letters in his many public appearances. Answer that question, please.
I'm pretty sure he's been very, very open in terms of soliciting input from the community about the needs of the community. And I know that with many of you here in the audience and up there, we've held meetings with you, we've talked about projects that you want to fund. So in my opinion, he has been extremely open and available to the community to discuss needs, to discuss projects. And then together we brainstorm about, with the community, what is available or not. Now, in these previous, I would say 2 to 3 fiscal years, it's been difficult on the city. We've had layoffs. Many of these special funds I discussed have been swept to go to the general fund. And so there is less and less funding certainly than 5 years ago. And it's become much more difficult to access funds for community projects. The city is in a financial crisis. The city council and the mayor have managed to balance the budget. I know many of you have tuned in if you're involved in the neighborhood council and you go to the budget day that is sponsored. You have heard this before about shrinking revenues to the city, which results in less ability to fund projects. So that's a reality. That's a reality that we're all facing.
Ms. Cubas, I'm going to go ahead and try to get all these questions out so everybody can get a chance to hear the questions today. Regarding the recycling program, Blue Can, how can this problem be remedied? Apparently the person's concerned about items being put in these blue cans that are being taken out before the city could harvest any proceeds from those containers. There are people who remove the valuable recyclables. I've seen this constantly, and it's usually the same persons who do this. I feel this is robbing the city of funds.
Okay, so I need to research that topic. I'm not an expert in that. But as I mentioned, in terms of CLARTS, it's the black bins, the trash from the black bins that are transferred there, deposited there, and then transferred to the landfills. The blue bins that you have at your house, they go somewhere else, so I need to figure out that whole pattern there.
Okay. Next question here, Ms. Cubas, and this person is asking if the council office provide a spreadsheet showing all the money spent and who received them. Is that possible to be received from your office?
Spreadsheet with what? All funds?
Well, this, for
General
example,
funds, special funds?
well, let's take, for example, the CLARTS fund. So if you take a fiscal year, 0, 10, and 11, 10 and 11 fiscal year, showing a spreadsheet from the beginning of the fiscal year to the end of the fiscal year, how money in that account was disseminated to various groups within the council district.
Well, let me get back to you on that.
Okay. How can any CD14 neighborhood councils and target projects within our district be eligible for CLARTS fund funding?
Well, I mentioned to you the process. We'd love to have you make an appointment with us, with the staff, with the councilman, discuss the specific project that you have in mind, and we can brainstorm together about how can we make that happen. With the caveat that, as I mentioned to you before, the city is in a budget deficit, in a budget crisis, and there is less money to go around. And so it is very difficult now to say, yes, you will all come and meet with the councilman and every request will be met. That is very difficult to say that that will be the case. And again, the project has to qualify for public funds because
Point of order. Point of order. I only specified neighborhood council, not any other community group.
Okay.
Did you let her know?
Yeah, specify, let me, for example, one of the comments that was made was a matching from proposal for the neighborhood councils within City 14 to have their dollars matched dollar for dollar from, say, the CLARTS fund for, let's say, the 45,000 are allocated from that.
I'd have to ask the councilman his thoughts on that proposal. Just so you know, though, I have with me a motion from August 2007 where there is an allocation to the LA-32 El Sereno Neighborhood Council for additional support to the activities of the El Sereno Neighborhood Council in the amount of $6,300. So it's not unusual that the council office partners with the neighborhood council to assist the neighborhood council.
There's a question that seems it was asked to you in the recent past. Why did Councilman Huizar give $20,000 to the Cabrillo Beach Booster? This question was asked to you over 6 months ago at a public meeting in Hillside Village. You said they were going to...
Cabrillo Beach?
Yeah, boosters. Apparently the person said that they were going to $20,000.
Okay, I don't know about this. I need to look it up. As I indicated in the ordinance, it's very specific that it has to be in Council District 14. Now, remember I mentioned there's the two funds, and I don't know why the other fund would, I don't know. I need to look it up.
A couple more here, and then I think we'll give Nick a check for 5 minutes.
Great. I'd love to have him come up because
Okay.
he definitely knows this more than I do. He was the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Ms. Cubas, can I get one more question in real quick, please?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just sometimes hard to multitask with all these cards in my hand. Off the top of your head, please automatically describe all CLARTS fund distributions in the last 10 months. Who has received money? Who was the requester? What was the purpose? And how much did they receive in CD 14?
Okay, again, I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Mr. Morales, you had a...
When it's public comment, I want to.
Okay, we have finished the questions that we have. We have 3 other questions that are not, that don't relate to the questions that we had asked the council member on the letter that we sent out. We have my notes on the items that you have said that you would get back to us on, so we can provide you with an outline of what those are
I
based
would
on the
love that
parts.
because I took notes and I know my staff is taking notes, but I'd love to have that.
Madam President, as a point of order on this agenda item, I think there is protocol for public comments.
Understood. After the presentation from Mr. Pacheco, I think we agreed on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Your 5 minutes of presentation will be well, taken.
Let's go.
Is it ready? Okay.
Ready? Yes. Hi, good evening, everybody. First, quickly, I think what you're going through right now is basically you want information. Ms. Cubas has committed to you to get you that information. Some of you have some very specific questions about income and expenditures. I think the fact that the neighborhood council as a body is requesting that information will get you the results that you're looking for. The CLARTS fund and all the community amenities funds, the discretionary funds, really flow through the council office. So ultimately, the council member has to make a decision with you, or in many cases, because there's so limited funds, they're going to choose projects that you may not favor, but that might be important to someone else in either this community or another community. So it's not about giving every community everything they want, because that's impossible, but really at least coming to you and saying, this is not a priority for us this time because we're prioritizing these other projects or topics or areas of need in the district. Ms. Cubas covered the process. It's pretty straightforward. You need to get the council member on board with whatever you're looking to get funded. There's been many times when I was in office that community members would come forward and I would have to tell them that we didn't have the funds for that project because we were funding another project that we just thought was more needy at the time. So in terms of getting funded everything, it's not going to happen. You know that, you've been through it. Some of these, it is an interesting question about Cabrillo Beach boosters, but I'm sure you'll get a response from that. The CLARTS Fund was simply my effort to create a very flexible, very open piece of money for CD14. We stole the idea from Lopez Canyon. As a matter of fact, Lloyd Montserrat was the one who stole the idea from Lopez Canyon when the Department of Public Works asked me to support, or more importantly, the Department of Sanitation asked me to support the acquisition of the transfer station. We basically told them that we thought an amenities fund should come with that acquisition. We requested $1 per ton for the community amenities fund. I was surprised to hear that it's only $60,000, but I will ask the clerks in the controller's office myself, because I remember when Antonio was council member, I asked for those numbers, and those numbers were pretty high. They were about $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. So I was surprised that this fiscal year it's listed at $60,000. So I will make a commitment to you guys, but I'll ask the city clerk also in the controller's office to get some numbers. I'll make my own public records request because I was on top of Antonio because as soon as he came into office, I felt he was not being honest about the fact that there were no funds. So I did my own public records request back then, so I can do it again. But, you know, you just need to work with the council office and get them to agree that you have a worthy project, and then you'll get funded. And it's just sometimes just a simple policy decision. All right. Any other questions or? Okay.
Thank you. We will take this in a very paced manner here. Mr. Chavez had a question prior to Ms. Cubas' final presentation. Mr. Pacheco, did I see your hand? Okay. And Mr. Aguilar after that. Mr. Chavez?
I'd like to know why there isn't enough money. We have a landfill at the end of Figueroa, right there in Eagle Rock. And for so many years, all the people from the communities I mentioned earlier, including El Sereno, Lincoln Heights, Glassell Park, and all of that, we cannot take our trash that we have on our pickups or our trucks or whatever it is to that dump. They always send us to the dump way out there in by Osborne, that big landfill over there in San Fernando Valley. Okay, why do we have to, when we have one in our backyard, have to take our trash to that dump over there? They charge us the same over there as they do here. It's not free.
I think you're talking about Shoal Canyon, right?
The one at Figueroa?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been around the last 50 years.
It's actually not a city of Los Angeles
The county.
dump site. It's the county, and the county regulated and put the restriction on there. So you need to learn to, when you drive up and they ask you where you're coming from,
Yeah, cheap.
you need to say you're from Glendale.
Give your address, right? Because people from Glendale and Pasadena can't take theirs, and when they're right there, we can't, you know, because they ask you for your
Are
address.
there any attorneys in the house? Please.
No, but in
I'll help you.
Kansas City, the councilman, you know, both Councilman Reyes and Mr. Huizar do something about in terms of dealing with the county so the county can make some kind of provision to allow all the residents from northeast Los Angeles to go there.
Okay, Mr. Chavez, we had kind of specific questions on tonight's for this presentation, so we will put that on the minutes and we'll.
My apologies, my brain got wet today and so I'm shorted out a little bit.
Got it, okay. Mr. Pacheco, Mr. Aguilar, Mr. Ayala, and Mr. Marquez on this side.
This is a statement from my part. I believe that neighborhood councils are here to get information from their council people and for us to give information to the council people. What I see tonight is something very wrong. We have representatives from the council office that have no answers for us. We have limited ability to ask questions. This is a very important topic and we're subjected to a very limited time. I see special meetings for what was supposed to be regular work being done without the people being involved. I think we should have another meeting, and this time people will be able to talk about it. Thank you.
One of the committees that actually can put that together is the Information and Forum Committee. And I appreciate your comments. On the September 22nd meeting, we discussed this and the format that it was going to take place. Unfortunately, you were not at that meeting, and maybe your input would have been appreciated at that time.
I don't appreciate special meetings when we don't need them.
I got that point. We'll put it on the minutes. Thank you. Mr. Aguilar?
Yes, Mr. Pacheco, let me see if I got this right. From what I remember, it's just a memory, that the CLARTS fund was modified a few years back, something stating to the effect that any funds that are not used reverts back to the city council's general fund. And if that's the case, how much of the CLARTS fund has reverted back to the general fund? That's my question. Has it been modified, your ordinance, since its inception? The other issue that I would like to address is this. Hypothetical, if the money can be addressed at city council, first and seconded and approved, and then goes to council's councilmatic fund, right? How would we know what council office is using with the added money that is being put into their councilmatic fund? Because the only two council districts that have this extra million, well, it used to be $250,000 a quarter. I don't know what's going on with the budget, but let's say back from what I remember 5 years ago, it used to be $250,000 a quarter. But what we're trying to do is figure out where the money's going, and should the fund be used only within council district 14 boundaries? And you're telling me that somehow that it could be used outside of council district boundaries? Maybe you could explain that to me on
Well, every discretionary fund has its own restrictions. The Street Furniture Fund has its restrictions. The Real Property Trust Fund has its restrictions. The Cultural Affairs Fund has its restrictions. The CLARTS Fund doesn't have restrictions other than it's to address amenities in Council District 14, and you can only spend it through a council motion. So if you're going straight from the CLARTS Fund to a community group, or straight from a CLARTS Fund to any entity, no, I'm saying then it's just a straight allocation from the CLARTS Fund to that other group through a motion. If for some reason you decide, and this is not inappropriate, but I'm just saying if for some reason you decide that you're going to spend CLARTS funds on salaries, then it would go straight from the CLARTS fund into the salary account, and then in the salary account is part of absorbing whatever salary expenditures are going on that fiscal year. You would obviously, after it's in the salary fund, you're not going to track that because it's going to be part of a bigger pool of money. If you move it from the CLARTS fund into one of the other funds, the Cultural Affairs Fund, the Real Property Trust Fund, or the Street Furniture Fund, then the first motion will move it from the CLARTS fund to the second fund, and then the rules that apply to that fund will be triggered. And some of those may or may not require a motion to be spent. So if it doesn't require a motion, you're not going to be able to track it.
How about councilmatic allocations to projects?
Can I make a point of order, Madam President, that we're going to be coming up on curfew in terms of the building time at 9 o'clock. We need to really bring that to a close and maybe extend this agenda for another day if the people have other questions.
We have two questions on this side, and then another question.
Well, I think I answered his.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Victor, you good? Val?
Nick, you're a previous councilman and also an attorney. If you were a councilman right now, and you requested information like what we're asking, how long should that take to receive?
You know, it really comes down to working with the holders of the source of information. In some instances, as Ms. Cubas pointed out, the clerk's office will have certain information, and in other instances, the controller's office will have information. And in another instance, the Department of Sanitation may also have further information on the income. So it really would require a staff member in the office to sit down and compile that information. If you're going to do a thorough report on the income and expenditures, I would say a speedy response would be 30 days, a normal response would be like 45 to 60 days to get a compiled report of all the income and expenditures.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pam?
All right, or Mr. Pacheco.
My question is about the CLARTS fund ordinance. Is that available online, or how? My question is either for you or Anna.
All ordinances are available online.
Okay. So, and what department would?
Well, she has the number and written down the ordinance you have, right, it's on the top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you write down the number, you can put it in the council manager. I think.
The last question comes to Mr. Morales. We have to wrap it up, so if you can just go ahead and make your question.
Thank you very much, Tammy. It's very disturbing to see Ms. Ana Cubas come into this room, the highest staff member that council member has. She said that. She knew what she was coming into this meeting for. She knew what the questions that were going to be asked for. She knew these same questions, a couple of them. I've asked for this information over 6 months ago in my newspaper and through public records. There's been another newspaper in downtown Los Angeles that asked for the same information. You have yet to give us that information. How could you come, if this is the best that is here, you didn't answer not one question this board and the community has been asking for. You just danced around. How could the councilman be spending money, giving checks, if he doesn't know what the balance is? Does that make any sense? You can't tell us what the balance is, and yet the councilman would write checks here, here, and here. When I asked you 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago, at a Hillside Village community town hall meeting regarding getting these funds and taking care of our community to stop the brownouts of the fire department, when I asked for the same monies to help our police department, there was no answer there. You told me, I showed you the document, Ana, on the Cabrillo Beach $20,000 expenditure. You came up to me, Carlos, where did you get that? And you promised me that you were going to get that information back to me. Here we are, and you still haven't done your job. How could you go spending the taxpayer money and not doing your job, and you're the highest paid person? What you just said, it's unacceptable.
Ms. Morales, thank you. Ms. Cubas, would you like to make a 30-second comment so that we can get to the next steps of this process? Thank you.
I just want to clarify regarding the request that the voice made to our office. We did respond within the limits of the law in terms of giving you something within 30 days, a written response. And as you recall, Carlos, specifically in the written email I sent you, I said specifically for the accounting and the expenditures of the fund, please feel free to contact the city clerk's office to receive that information. Because you were asking for, I believe, up to 5 years or more of that. And I would love to devote full time to getting that information to you, but that is why we have the city clerk to help us gather that information. I don't know if you have contacted the city clerk's office, or like Councilman Pacheco said, the controller's office. But I do recall specifically that I responded to you in writing as to the next steps.
Thank you. We want to thank everyone
I have
for...
one question. Is it difficult to get that information that we're asking for? It sounds like it's very difficult for you to acquire that information. Are you going to come back to us 30 days later to say that we have to go through the city to get this information?
I need to check back in with the clerk's office. I need to check in.
Okay, so what I'm saying, you're not going to come back and say we need to go to the clerk's office like you did Carlos.
I think the question is, that from the questions that we have asked, the information that needs to get back to this council, will you come back and ask us to look for it instead of having your office bring the answers to us, to this, to the board, to the questions that we have?
Certainly, we're committed to providing the information, and as Councilman Pacheco mentioned, gathering this information can take anywhere from 30 days to 45 days to 60 days in terms of, even if you look at 1 year or 2 years or 3 or 4 or 5 years back. So I need to get back to you on what is that timeline.
Madam?
So what we would like to do is request from your office the responses to the questions that we will be submitting to you in writing so that we can get some feedback on that. For all of the questions that were asked and not answered, and any of the items that the neighborhood council members and stakeholders who would like to see in writing, you will also put that in a formal request from this council, Ms. Cubas. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Pacheco. We need to wrap it up. We need to get out of this building. The lights are coming off.
Table agenda item number 12.
Okay.
Now,
It's just announcements.
right, so, do we have a,
30-second on the announcements, please. Go ahead, make the announcement. Make your announcement.
This is for the board members, LA-32. There's going to be October the 16th budget day. We need 2 appointed board members from LA-32 to represent LA-32 for the mayor's budget day. I don't know who that would be, but I place that before the board.
Free lunch involved in that, free food.
okay.